Hello everyone, my name is Archie and this is the student-led podcast here at Goldsmiths University. And in this talk series, we invite talented individuals in technology and we pick their mind for any insight and wisdom that could benefit you on your journey. Now today I have a very exciting guest with myself. He's a doctor in computer science and artificial intelligence, a professor here at Goldsmiths University, and my personal favourite, a musician and drummer. So I'd love to welcome Matthew King. How are you doing, Matthew?
Yeah, great to see you, Archie. Thanks for bringing me in.
Oh, it's lovely. It's a pleasure to have you. Now, of course, as I have mentioned, in this lecture series, we basically ask talented individuals in tech to give us their insights. And for those of the users that don't know at home, what is it that you do? What is it you focus on in technology?
Yeah, I've kind of got two jobs in a sense. So my sort of academic teaching job is I run the online computer science degree, which is run in collaboration with University of London's worldwide programs.
Oh, brilliant.
And it runs on the Coursera platform, which people may well be familiar with. It's a sort of big learning platform with hundreds of millions of users, and we were the first undergraduate degree on that platform. And so I sort of run that and have done since we started building it in 2018. And the other part is my sort of research work. So typically academics would have, a kind of main teaching task and a research part. And my research, I look at education technology, and I've fed a lot of that into what we do on the online programs. But also my sort of first love, if you like, is doing AI applied to audio, I would say, yeah.
No, that's amazing. And as we said before, we were talking in the podcast, we both love music, of course. So that'd be, brilliant something to talk about later. And I'll talk a bit more about some controversial AI and music pieces of news that I've seen very recently. Just so our users know, our listeners know, what is it that gets you interested in, say, the combination of AI and audio? Why does that itch at you?
So I think that anyone who's trying to get into AI especially, or any kind of deeply technical discipline like that, it's really important to work on something that you have really strong domain knowledge in, okay? And so I tell this to a lot of students and other people, if you're bringing some knowledge to something, then you're going to just get through it. You're going to accelerate and succeed faster than someone who just thinks it might be interesting, so they're just getting into it. So for me, the sort of AI music thing was, I always loved music. Was sort of all of my friends are kind of really into music, and some of them musicians. And so, for example, went to school with Square Pusher, who's Tom Jenkinson. Don't know if who's a sort of fantastic musician, and so sort of around all that stuff. And my friends around record labels and that kind of thing. So yeah, music was a real thing, and I was in a band and played drums. So it was just natural for me when I started studying AI and in my case originally evolutionary computing to apply that to music, because it was just ideas just came to me about with that technology I can do this, right? Because I already knew the domain.
Yes, that's awesome. See, I'm quite similar in my own aspect, mostly business oriented, but I cannot help myself when I look at AI and the impact it's going to have on us going forward as a civilization. Which you mentioned something about how you studied, was adaptive, what was it you studied?
Oh yeah, so my master's was evolutionary and adaptive systems.
Evolutionary and adaptive systems. So, and your bachelor's was in computer science, was that right?
The bachelor's was genetics and zoology.
That's it.
Yeah.
Yes. So I wanted to talk a bit more about that. It's quite a leap between genetics and zoology to the computer science field. Am I right in saying that?
Yeah, but it depends which bit of biology you're doing.
Yes.
Especially these days as well. There's a lot of simulation and a lot of computation going on in biological research. And especially if you think about what people like DeepMind are doing with the protein folding and other drug discovery work they're doing. There's a big crossover. But back then, not so much. I mean, the computer that they had in the genetics lab when I was studying at Leeds was an Apple Mac, one of the Apple 2 or something, little ones. Because it was kind of the human genome was kind of cranking up then, Human Genome Project, which is obviously the big computational analysis project. But so the transition from biology to computing was not so obvious back then. But what I found, as a kid, was always really into programming and computers, and I was quite a good programming stuff when I was a kid, games, like a lot of people of a certain vintage, and with the Spectrum and all that. But then stopped doing it while I was at school, really, because there just wasn't any facility for learning about it there.
Right.
And then biology became the thing I was really interested in at school, so I studied that. But then in biology, I naturally found myself going towards the more computational aspects, especially in genetics, where just learning that essentially the human genome and DNA is like a mad computer, essentially. That's where you got things switching things off and different things. Yeah, it's like a mad algorithm that runs the whole of the living world, So yeah, that kind of blew my mind, understanding that a bit more deeply, that you do at degree level. And then the next phase was, okay, well, what's the crossover? And that's what that master's course was. It was a really innovative course where it's quite cross-disciplinary. So you had, like psychologists, you had computer scientists, biologists like me, all in the mix, and each of us having a different perspective on it. And yeah, that's where that came from.
That's brilliant, actually. And I actually had a thought that occurred to me as you were saying that, because obviously as civilization we are progressing in a more and more technologically advanced direction. That's just inevitable. See, I was actually studying physics at, doesn't matter where, but I was going to go and study theoretical physics at Nottingham. Now, of course, COVID happened and grades got messed up. But that's where my heart was set. I loved physics, probably in the same way you enjoyed biology. But eventually, in the way we both did, we gravitated towards computer science. Even now, my friend who's just finished up his bachelor's in physics is doing a master's in, you guessed it, machine learning. So now that you've highlighted to me, actually, it kind of makes sense in this day and age that sooner or later you're probably going to start leveraging AI, machine learning, deep learning, that sort of thing, because it's so intrinsically woven in what we're doing now. I just thought that was a really interesting thought, actually.
Well, it goes back to the domain thing as well, right? So it goes back to the domain and the thing you're interested in and passionate about, and then the computing or the business, whatever it is you're learning about at university, then becomes the thing that you apply to that. So yeah, if you're really into physics, then
exactly.
Computing could be a really helpful tool to apply to that, or whatever it is, right?
I mean, we wouldn't be anywhere near as advanced in physics if we didn't have computers, that's for sure. But such an interesting conversation topic I did want to talk about was about genetics. Now, transition from biology to computer science, because it was such a leap when I did my research, and I was really fascinated as I wonder why the pivot. But now that we've talked more about your past and what you're currently doing, what is it you actually want to achieve in your line of work?
That's a great question. Yeah, what do you want to achieve with? Yeah. So I guess looking at the trajectory of things I've done, so something I find very fulfilling is the online learning stuff, because, although you might think of Open University and distance learning as being something that maybe is a bit dry, but the reality is that with our degree that we have thousands of students all across the world, and they've got this amazing community that's developed within that program. And there's all this soft stuff, right, that you don't think about when you're building an online degree. And so that stuff really drives me. And when I get messages from people in Brazil or wherever they are, right, saying, "Oh, I've just finished your course, I really enjoyed it, whatever, thanks brilliant. A lot, really appreciate what you guys are doing," that stuff. And you realise you've got this reach, and you're really changing people's lives. So that stuff, I want to do more of that. So, we're working on redeveloping some of that work at the moment, and always trying to push out new content. So that's one aspect. And then with the research work, it's always been driven by what I think is interesting. I allow myself that, to just sort of, okay, what interests me. So I'm kind of at the moment looking into a few different lines of work, but for the music stuff, it's always been about creating experiences that are not possible otherwise. So we might get into this a bit when we talk about AI and music maybe later. But my reason for creating AI tech and applying it to music is that I want the people who use it, musicians and possibly the audience experiencing it, to experience something they wouldn't experience otherwise. So to take them out of their safety zone maybe, and comfort zone, I should say, rather than safety zone. Comfort zone, and just to be able to do something they wouldn't do otherwise. And so things like music improvisation systems which improvise with you and encourage you to try out new styles of music or improvisation, or creating synthesizer programming systems which create sounds with your synthesizer that you didn't think was possible to make, or allow you to explore the sounds in a deeper way than you could any other way. Stuff like that.
Yeah, it's honestly really interesting that you said that, and I'll elaborate why. So, as we spoke about earlier before the podcast, my modus operandi, it's business, it's excellence, it's the idea of one can, and it's their moral obligation to be the very best version of themselves in all directions of their life. And what comes with that is I read a lot, and a lot of successful people will say this same thing. What motivates the greatest people, whether they be scientists, businessmen, charity workers, religious leaders, is this all-encompassing idea that they live to serve. And in both of the points that you mentioned there about your research and the courses you did, it's all about the user. You want them to experience something different. You want, going back to your earlier point, being able to have that reach around the world and enrich people. It's incredibly noble, and it goes to show, I mean, it's hard getting a PhD, being a doctor, and yet here you are. And I don't doubt it's that sense of driven purpose that's allowed you to get that far. And I find that absolutely brilliant and refreshing, because honestly, I look at some students, they're in computer science for the money, or I look at other people that are in business, it's for the money. But being driven by purpose, I find that incredibly commendable. It's brilliant.
I guess money's quite helpful in that it has a clear, it's quite a good metric, because it's just one number. It's like, how much money have I got in my account, or whatever it is, how much is my business worth? It's a good metric. But yeah, I mean, it's a bit more challenging to deal with metric of how many people's lives you've changed and how much and how and all that stuff. But nevertheless, because it's a richer metric of success, it's going to be more rewarding, maybe.
I mean, most things that you could measure as being the most valuable things on the earth are intangible. I mean, you can't measure happiness, can you? You can build indexes and all that sort of thing, but you can't measure something that's purely subjective. But I find that, like I said, absolutely brilliant. Just move the conversation more towards AI opportunities, because I don't doubt there will be entrepreneurs listening who would want to leverage the advice and experience of someone who is a doctor in artificial intelligence. Are there any sort of opportunities you can identify with music and AI that perhaps haven't been tapped yet? Or any opportunities that you've seen yourself that maybe you think, that might be profitable?
Yeah, so it's focusing on the users again. Let's carry on with that one, right? Because so a lot of systems that are coming out now seem to just be trying to almost prove that whatever creative process people normally follow to make music or something can be just turned into a bunch of code, essentially, and maybe a neural network model or two. And it's like, but what does that tell you? It's like, okay, so great. So there was a pattern in what we were doing musically. Of course there was a pattern, otherwise it would just be random noise, right? So well done, you found the pattern, and you can now regenerate in that same pattern. And I guess, and it's technically amazing, but I think that ultimate, and it makes useful tools maybe that sort of make things easier. Like, I don't know, if you can generate music without having any skill about music, but you just give it, I want a soundtrack for my video or something, and it just does it.
Music.
Yeah, so if you can do that, I mean, that's great. But for me, my interest does not necessarily lie. There's a lot of people looking at that. So if you're looking for opportunities, you want to find some some ground that's a bit more fertile, maybe for your own ideas. So I think, I mean, what I've been working on recently is writing a book, which is all about. I shouldn't plug in my book now, but
no,
anyway,
go right ahead.
But it sort of expresses what I think is the opportunity, I suppose, which is that. So I'm looking at music technology for musicians to use. So again, going back to the musicians, so the book teaches people how to, get AI technology and embed it in music production tools, and for me, that's an interesting area. So new tools that people can use to do what they were doing already. They're already domain experts or whatever, but they can go further with it or do something different. So that would be where I would be looking for opportunities.
And again, all user-centered as well, the idea that you're enabling other people to go out and basically make music from scratch, which I think is brilliant. Now, it leads me more into a more controversial topic that I've, since learning about it, I've really wanted to talk to you about, because I find it really interesting and very grey, as I'll elaborate on. So I read a news article that basically there are random strangers that are able to train models to basically find patterns and listen to artists. And of course, artists, they put out a lot of data. It's their business. There's a lot of music online. And one random stranger basically built a model that created an entirely new Drake song. And the funny thing is, this Drake song was really good. People started listening to it. Now, it raises the question, who actually owns the copyright or royalties, as it were, to that piece of music? Is it the stranger that created it? Or is it the artist whose voice was used?
Yeah, so well, I think the answer is that pretty quickly the streaming platforms pulled that one down, didn't they?
I think so.
So the record company clearly exerted their copyright, if you like, and demanded that be removed. But the question is, is it because it had the name on it? So because if you just made a voice, I mean, if I did a really good impression of someone and sing, and I know you're a singer, right? So if you did a really good impression of someone else's singing, I mean, for example, I know Ariana Grande. I've seen my daughter's a fan. I know.
Yeah, I've seen it too.
She can do brilliant impressions of other people singing, right? So if she releases a track where she's singing like someone else, is that a problem? If she doesn't advertise it as being by that person, I mean, it's just so the question is. If someone's doing that with an AI, is that worse than learning how to do an impression?
Yeah.
So I think it's the name maybe that the issue.
Perhaps it is. Yeah. I mean, imagine if that random stranger was to label it something completely different, but to all means and effect, it sounded identical to Drake. There wouldn't be that copyright issue. Perhaps it was literally that, just using Drake's name. Maybe it was that.
But the problem is, of course, it would have been trained on his voice as well. So
yes,
actually,
so there would have been
although if you were learning to do an impression, you'd be trained on his voice as well. So what's the difference? I'm not so sure, right? But no, that's a real 2023 thing, wasn't it? All the sort of, I don't know, there were, for me, maybe more interesting and philosophically more interesting ones, which were where they would get a singer who'd passed away, like David Bowie, to sing a Nirvana song or something, and that kind of stuff where they're actually bringing people back from the dead and getting them to sing,
That reminds me of another news story that I read, basically where, because I love the Beatles, they basically took one of Paul McCartney's older songs. They then obviously trained a model to put his younger voice in, except and not his older voice. But then they went a step further and they put John Lennon's voice into it as well. A Beatle member that's been dead for X amount of years. Don't know, 30 odd or something like that. Yeah. The idea of being able to resurrect an artist, you could do it to Elvis or Sinatra or, Michael Jackson, anyone really. Do you reckon there is a viable domain for that, if that's even ethical?
If they've passed away, I mean, I guess it goes back to the copyright again. If the estate owns the copyright and then they release a new track with that person's name on it, are they allowed to do that? But yeah, I mean, maybe if it's something that a person can use for their own purposes and it's not being shared and people aren't making money out of it, maybe not such an issue. But yeah, I mean, it's clearly... What about the rights of the dead person? to put it bluntly, surely you need to ask them, but you can't, right?
Yes,
so
closest people would be the family.
Yeah,
I think there were talks about this with regards to actors being able to revive actors and come back and do things like that. Because obviously they're long past gone. I suppose the closest people you'd ask is their family. If there's no family, who do you ask? All very, very grey. But yes, asking that, I was very curious as to what you'd think of that, and ultimately I do agree. All of it is to do with copyright and who owns the proper royalties. So, yes.
But then there are other types of systems where they've been trained on copyrighted material, but the things that come out is not clearly the same as somebody else, right? So obviously, if you're training something on Drake's voice and you hear it, it's like, okay, that's Drake's voice. You've copied that. That's clearly an issue. But if you have trained a music writing system that will write a melody and a bass line and some chords, and it's trained on all of the pop music ever written, and it then generates a new piece. What about that? So what about the rights of the people that wrote all that music that never allowed for it to be used in this way? That if you couldn't just use the original piece of music that you had trained it on, you wouldn't be allowed to make money off that. But can you somehow magically make money off something that's trained off of that copyrighted material? And that's something that's really a hot legal topic right now, I think. I mean, it's the same for the image generators, right? So the sort of Mid-Journey versus whoever it is, Pinterest, everyone who uses Pinterest that it scraped, then that kind of stuff. So then it's this kind of derived works thing, and the very legal specifics of whether something is a derived work or it's original or whatever, right?
Well, that's the thing with the AI has opened so many doors for us. It's almost allowed technological advance to not as dramatic as this, but we haven't given enough thought to the regulations before this AI boom. I suppose that's why it's called a boom, because it's all of a sudden, suddenly we've got all these really unanswered questions that weren't really in the forefront of our minds before. Honestly, that just makes it more exciting. I think all the best things in life come in explosions. So, you know,
I'm super excited about it, I have to admit. I mean, yeah, the doom and gloom, but I mean, it's just a great time to be alive right now. People, remember that. It's like it's a cool time to be alive. We've stopped making more and more social network platforms, and we've started to make something interesting with computers. I mean, God, we've had like this winter of dull technology.
Oh, it really, it really has just been social media.
It's been so boring,
yeah.
right? And I just don't use any of it particularly. I don't like it. I don't find it interesting.
Well, I use LinkedIn, but most professionals do.
And I'm not criticising anyone who does. I'm just saying that for me, has no interest. It's just I don't see how it's any different from a glorified chat room or whatever that we had in 1995. Technically. Yeah, it's scalable and stuff, and you can share more types of and it's the user experience tech on it is interesting, but ultimately the actual thing that it does is not interesting. And for me, because I grew up in, I was born in the 70s, grew up in the 80s. It was the space age. We're watching. There were probes going off to Jupiter or whatever. That was the cool tech. And then, now all we've got is one social network after the other that's just damaging people or whatever. So. Finally, we're through that, and we've got
actual interesting innovations going.
That's right.
On.
Yeah,
yes.
So I'm ready. I'm down with it.
No, that honestly brilliant. Yeah, and I could chat your ear off about the psychology of why social media is so damaging. Perhaps we can say that for after the podcast. I wanted to talk a little bit more about because of course most students at this age, about 18 to 25, whatever. I mean, any age really. They can feel a bit lost, as it were, uncertain about their future. And obviously, hearing about your transition from biology to computer science, it's quite, now that you've explained it, it's less of a leap than I thought it was. But it goes to show that you could do anything at this age. But often that cripples people, the analysis paralysis, as it were.
Yeah.
If you were starting again, let's say, I don't know, first year of university, is there anything you would do differently that would get you sooner towards your goals or make things easier?
I suppose I would say you have to respect your own journey and own it in a sense. So, my journey was a bit unusual and probably not the optimal journey to get to some mysterious point. So if it's like, I want to be running an online degree with students in 150 countries or whatever, right? If that was my objective when I was 19. What would the optimal path been? Well, actually, I didn't take that path at all. I took a completely different one, and as a result, became a richer person in terms of experience. And so, I don't know about that idea of a sort of ideal path. But if people aren't sure how they're going to get to where, if you've got a strong idea of what you want to be at that age and what you want to achieve, that helps, I think, because you can do things which clearly lead towards that. But if you really don't know, then I think you should just find things you're interested in and just put, like you were saying earlier, try and do it as best as you can. Whatever it is you're doing, just do it as best as you can and good things will happen.
Precisely.
That's what I think. I mean, when I finished my undergraduate degree, I still didn't really know what I wanted to do. And I fortuitously was phoned up by a school friend I'd been in a band with, and he said, have you finished your degree? Yeah. So do you want to come and join my band and go on tour? So I was like, okay. So I've just completed this genetics degree or whatever. Do you want to come play drum kit in my band? I was like, yeah, of course I do. Who wouldn't? You're 21. So I did that for a couple of years and gradually transitioned into getting really into music and music production and working with different people.
Oh, brilliant.
And so that's how I learned about music technology. I didn't plan to learn about music technology. I just got naturally drawn to it because I was interested in it. And I took an opportunity to do some music stuff and then that fueled what I did when I took my master's, because I then had this domain knowledge. I was like, I know what I know how people work with music technology. I like it. But and I'm learning about this new technology. What can I do with that extends it?
Oh, that's awesome. I love to hear it. With regards to, because you mentioned about going on tour and everything, was it your attraction towards software and AI and all the derivatives? Was that because of your experiences, perhaps backstage when you were touring? That is, brilliant.
Oh, so why was I drawn to the sort of more technical software side of music rather than, well, because this was in the late 90s, and that's what for me the most interesting music was technological music. So I ended up releasing a record on Aphex Twin's record label back then, and those friends of mine were all sort of hanging out with those guys, and that was all technical, people using drum machines and technology and software to make stuff, and those are the people I was around. So it wasn't traditional instruments. Yeah, the band I was in actually happened to be a funk band, but it's like a fusion kind of thing. Yeah. So it was like quite technical, but kind of funk nonetheless. But still, the group of people I knew in Brighton, where it was, they were sort of doing techno and sort of drum and bass stuff and whatever, right? So there was, for me, it was just a normal way of making music that kind of suited my maybe inner sort of interests, I guess, yeah.
Would you ever go back to touring?
Well, yeah, that's the thing. So I did go back to it a few years. So I did the Masters, and then I was just kind of I worked at Bristol Uni as a research engineer. So I was actually doing programming web platforms it's actually for deaf people. So the idea was to make video streaming technology that would work on mobile phones. This is in about 2001. So 3G was just about becoming available. Right. So we're like, okay, that gives us enough bandwidth to do audio. Audio and video mainly for deaf people. And so we can maybe get it working on phones. So yeah, I was doing all that, but then I got another phone call from a friend, like, do you want to go on tour? And again, I had another path split, which was, I'd actually been offered a job at Bristol as working as a database engineer, which, just good solid work, could probably still be there now. And then I got the phone call saying, we've got, do you want to come and tour around Europe with this singer, Danny Siciliano, who used to work with Matthew Herbert, if you've heard of him, who's connected with Goldsmiths, actually.
Oh, really?
Through the New Cross record label, kind of collaboration with him and his... Anyway,
that's cool.
Connected to all that. But... yeah, and I went on this, so, okay, yeah, I'll do that. Yeah, why not? Because at least it was paid, unlike the first tour. Not so much the first one, but this one was, yeah. So, yeah, it was, what am I saying? I don't know. I've lost my path now.
No.
Yeah.
Honestly, it's fascinating to hear. I mean, I think we're coming up to the end of our allotted time slot. So I want to wrap things up in a way that's impactful for the user. What advice, given everything you've been through and all the accumulative wisdom you've earned, what advice would you give to a student who is right here, right now, beginning of 2024, with all these different industries exploding? What advice would you give that they can best navigate it, so that's in relationship or in alignment with their goals?
Yeah, so again, so trust your own path is kind of something we were talking about earlier. So I'm a great believer that you should... see value in your own unusual way of getting to where you've got. Even if it involved being unemployed or doing whatever at some point. If you have the right mentality, you're going to be picking stuff up all the time as all that stuff's happening, and that will eventually become valuable later, I think. And as long as you sort of treat it in the right way, and then in terms of aligning yourself with, how do you get into AI or whatever, right? So. It's got to be the domain knowledge. You've got to come in with something that other people don't have, or a unique perspective. And I think creativity in particular is really valuable there. So at Goldsmiths, one of the themes is kind of creativity and applying technology in creative contexts. And part of the reason for that is, again, that if someone's they've got an area of interest which they know about and they bring it to the technology, they have a unique perspective and they kind of know when things are right. So if you're building an AI system that makes music or something, and you've spent a few years producing music yourself, you'll know you'll just get through it faster. You'll know. And I mean, similarly, a lot of people asking me about whether people should be using AI to do their work and that kind of thing, and whether it's worth learning computing at all if an AI can program, if ChatGPT can write code better than a human. If you already know how, if you're a decent programmer and you've made the effort to learn that, when you use ChatGPT, you'll be that much faster than someone who's just come into it fresh, right? So it's sort of valuing what you're learning and realizing that it doesn't just, it's always worth something at some point.
That's brilliant. And it really resonates with what you said earlier about trusting the process. I'll admit I'm quite goal-oriented, and if I'm not there at my goal yet, I can get a bit itchy and a bit frustrated. So it's nice to hear someone from a position that I would like to be in, being able to say, oh, trust the process, it will work out. Because frankly, I'm not alone in thinking that times are uncertain today where we're going to be in, 5 years' time, let alone 20. So it's nice to hear that, trust in the process and everything. Anyway, that comes to the end of our time slot. If you'd like to look into camera and basically let people know where they can find information about yourself, portfolio, everything like that, that'd be brilliant.
Yeah, so I'm not sure. I think we'll have some sort of text info that comes with the video, and you can go and look at my website. You can just Google my name because I've got a reasonably unique name, and you'll be able to find a bunch of stuff about me and read my papers, listen to my music, that kind of stuff. And the book is coming out on Routledge in June 2024.
Buy his book.
If you like C++ and audio programming.
Oh, brilliant.
And AI.
Oh, thank you. Well, it's been a pleasure having you, Matthew. Honestly, lovely way to kickstart this podcast series. Yes, thank you very much for tuning in. Please tune in next time when we'll be interviewing more individuals talented with technology so that we can pick their mind and gain those insights so that it can better help us all. I think we've learned some great things from Matthew today regarding the relationship between music and AI, but also the deeper stuff as well, such as trusting the process and being a bit more grounded, as it were. Yes, thank you for listening and tune in next time.